Hello, my dear Christians. How are you? I want to send greetings to everyone who left their lovely comments on the previous video. You really encourage me to keep making this type of content, and I hope you're enjoying it. A special shout out to the first comment by Logan Johnson 8051. Remember, if you leave a comment, I'll be responding or giving you a little heart if you comment on the first day. Now, let's get started with the summary. On a new day at a company, we learn that the current number of employees is just 3: the president, the vice president, and our protagonist. The workplace has only 2 rooms, which is a bit embarrassing considering its size. Our protagonist, SEO, was working while one of the girls was shopping online and the other was playing Lol. At that moment, the pink-haired girl, Do Jimin, spoke to CEO and asked him for a favor, which immediately made CEO suspicious. He responded with a no, assuming she wanted him to do her part of the work. Jimin, the vice president, insisted and asked if he wasn't going to help her, reminding him how she always listened to his confessions in the past. CEO didn't understand why she brought that up, but Jimin said she just missed him. In a flirty tone, she reminded him how he was always by her side in college, and how she found it sweet that he even texted her at night. CEO, embarrassed, reminded her of all the things she did during college: assignments, hanging out with friends, moving houses. She always needed help and never learned to do anything on her own. Jimin didn't remember it that way, and sarcastically said everyone was just too nice in helping her. SEO mentioned how she is now the vice president of the company, viewing her as a queen bee. At first, he thought she had a nice personality and appearance, but then he realized she took advantage of many guys in her classes and only showed up to provide insignificant help at the end. CEO was used to this from his previous job, but he still found Jimin annoying and unbearable. Suddenly, the other girl, Kan Yuna, the president, reprimanded Seo for how he spoke to his superiors, threatening not to pay him if he continued. Yuna scolded him, questioning why he found the hierarchy ridiculous and why he expected his superiors to do all the work. SEO, in his thoughts, couldn't understand what the president contributed to the company since she only complained. Moreover, he wasn't in this job because he liked it. He had previously worked at a major gaming company but had long overtime hours, even on weekends, and suffered under terrible policies and verbal abuse. One day, he had an accident involving the company president. Using his savings, he reached a settlement, but it would be difficult to find another job quickly. Jimin approached him because her company was hiring, and Seo ended up accepting. Now he found himself in this current mess. He knew he couldn't spend money as he wished, and that all jobs had their challenges. Although this job was similar to his previous one, his life felt ruined, and the workplace was as it was. For these reasons, he thought about quitting as soon as possible, but wondered if he had anywhere else to go. The rumor from his previous job had spread, making it hard for his resume to be accepted elsewhere. He realized this company was the only place left for him to earn money, and if he left, he could end up on the streets. He had to endure it until he could find a new job. Yuna asked why he looked so upset and if he had anything to say. Seo shook his head, thinking he just had to endure it. Yuna continued, saying he looked annoyed, but Seo kept thinking about being patient. She kept criticizing him, saying she hired him after he was fired, and this was how he repaid her. She also said he lacked the skills for the job and should find another if he didn't have anything better. She added that she had others who could replace him and thought he wasn't worth his salary, which she only approved because of Jimin's recommendation. She expected more from him, but believed his lack of social life was why he was fired from his previous job. This last comment pushed Seo over the edge. He shouted at Yuna to shut up. He felt awful working there, though Yuna asked if he had anything else to say. For Seo, that was enough. He remembered how the company was seeking investors, but without subcontracted employees, it was strange they'd receive any. He wondered what he should do in this situation and anxiously wished the girls luck for their interview. Jimin tried to calm Yuna down, whispering that she knew the situation. If they didn't have results by the end of the month, their parents would stop supporting them, and without Seo, they'd be in trouble. Yuna expressed that Seo could do whatever he wanted since he wouldn't find another job and would eventually call her back. But when he returned, she wanted him to kneel and beg. Maybe then she'd hire him as a janitor. She knew about Seo's current state and expected to see him in a week. Seo left angry, but after some time, he couldn't believe what he saw. Yuna, embarrassed, wanted to talk to him, but Seo felt there was nothing left to discuss. They were done. That day, Seo asked Yuna if she had come to show off that she had hired another new employee. Nervously, Yuna explained that there were issues with personnel management, and if she couldn't resolve them, the investors wouldn't trust her company. Yuna wanted to make an exception because this was a special case, and offered Seo the opportunity to return to work. When Seo asked if she couldn't hire someone else, Yuna, embarrassed, admitted that it wasn't so easy to recruit just anyone. She acknowledged that Seo had problems in his employment history, But since he was her first employee, she promised to treat him well. For her, it was a good offer, but she was left speechless when Seo asked if that was all she had to say, adding if she was done. Juna couldn't understand why Seo wasn't excited, given that he was unemployed and broke, something Seo himself was questioning. Based on everything Juna said, Seo concluded that she couldn't find anyone else. He didn't believe Juna sought him out of pity. After calling her shameless and ungrateful, Seo found her story hard to believe. This only made Juna blush even more, but she proudly admitted that she had made a mistake. If that wasn't enough, she even offered to treat him to something or give him a gift. He just needed to ask. She even mentioned the possibility of giving him a raise. Seo thought it was unbelievable, but wondered how far Juna's pride would go. He couldn't tell if this was her way of apologizing, so he came up with an idea. He asked her to remove what she was wearing and admit she had made a mistake. Juna, embarrassed, asked if Seo was crazy since it was something indecent. Seo didn't think Juna was in a position to refuse, pointing out that even if she hired someone new, they wouldn't adapt quickly enough to handle the tasks, orders, requests, expenses, management, and more that Seo used to manage. He expected Juna to understand that. To Juna, it seemed extreme, but Seo insisted. She was the one who asked him to return, and the right thing to do was to comply with his request. He pointed out how she always asked others to do things but couldn't do them herself. Seo, waiting for her response, asked her to leave if she wouldn't comply. Juna felt cornered. Seo told her not to just stand there and leave, which she reluctantly agreed to do. She hadn't expected things to escalate to this level, but if it meant Seo would return, she would keep her word. Completely humiliated, she hoped this would be enough. Seo was impressed, as he hadn't expected her to go through with it. Juna, upset, asked if he was mocking her. Seo admitted he didn't expect her to fulfill his request, which made Juna call him a lunatic. Even so, Seo realized that Juna was deeply embarrassed. Seeing someone so proud in such a state, Seo couldn't let the opportunity pass. He told her that her actions demonstrated her sincerity, but he had one more thing to ask. Intrigued, Juna listened. Seo wanted changes in the scope of his work. Although Juna thought everything was fine, Seo wanted assurances. She listened as Seo requested that she not interfere with his work. He didn't want to risk going through the same issues again. Embarrassed, Juna agreed. Seo then added that he wanted to decide the development plan and overall direction of the work. In the future, they would need more manpower, so Seo requested the authority to make those decisions, including approving the company's financial state and overall direction before moving forward. Juna stopped him and asked if he was trying to take all her authority, as she was the president. Seo didn't think it mattered, since she didn't know how to do any of the tasks her role required. Being the president, he said, didn't mean playing games in the office. Juna tried to excuse herself, saying she had just been distracted for a bit. Seo believed she would continue acting the same way until the company went bankrupt. Juna wanted to know if Seo had ever been a president before, even though she knew he was capable of making some changes. Suddenly, they heard someone approaching. The only way Seo would help her was if she accepted his terms, especially since Juna didn't have much time. She had to make a quick decision. A girl was talking on the phone and coming down the stairs. Juna accepted Seo's help, realizing it was her best option, so they agreed to meet the next day at work. The following day, Seo asked Juna if she thought the company was a joke because the management of financial statements and business reports was a disaster, and no outsourcing work had ever been done. He didn't know what they had been doing all this time and thought it would be best if she resigned. While Seo continued scolding her, he spoke to Juna without any filter. Juna only listened to his reprimands without responding, which Jimin found interesting. With everything that was happening, Seo ended the meeting for the day and gave the girls a chance to go eat. He also asked Juna to review the meeting minutes and financial statements and send them to him. Juna reluctantly agreed, but asked Jimin if she would join her for lunch. Jimin said she would catch up later as she had something to take care of. So, Juna went ahead. Jimin wished her a good meal and stayed alone with Seo. She looked at him until she finally spoke, asking if he was tired even though he had just returned. She apologized for not being able to stop Juna earlier because it was wrong, but she had done everything possible to convince her. When Jimin was about to ask Seo for a favor, he cut her off, saying no, as they had outsourcing to deal with in a few days. He told Jimin that if she had nothing else to do, she should go eat. Jimin understood but tried to invite Seo to something since she had her own money. Seo reminded her that she never paid her share when they went out for drinks and didn't believe her at all. Jimin questioned if Seo thought she was wasting his time, since they would be working together again. She wanted to invite him out as a gesture for his hard work and suggested they eat or drink together, though she seemed embarrassed. She insisted flirtatiously, which Seo noticed, but he responded with a firm no, leaving Jimin confused. Seo was aware of the rumors about her from university and wasn't naive enough to fall for them. He knew she hadn't paid for any of their outings and that Jimin was trying to get him to cover for her. Jimin tried to excuse herself, saying she appreciated his hard work. She brought up the time she confessed to him and asked why he had made his confession in front of everyone. Jimin knew that despite everything, Seo had always helped her. She wanted them to have lunch together because she felt they'd have a good time, asking for Seo's opinion. However, Seo looked at her incredulously and asked if he seemed desperate or easy. Jimin didn't understand the rumors about how she got tasks done for free, but Seo was fully aware of what she said about him behind his back at the company, calling him depraved, a stalker, and worse. He admitted he was in a bad situation, which was why he had agreed to work at the company. However, it was obvious to him that Jimin was trying to manipulate him. Seo continued, saying he knew the company's situation and that it was a miracle it still existed. He didn't know how much money they had left, but if they didn't act soon, it would go under. The first thing a struggling company does is reduce staff, and considering the president and vice president did nothing, Jimin would be the first to go. Nervously, Jimin thought he was joking, but Seo told her to prepare for the next week. This upset her, and she yelled at Seo, begging him not to fire her and promising to work harder. She asked if he liked her, to which Seo honestly admitted that he did. However, he wasn't sure if it was because of drinks or love at first sight. What stood out the most to him was how she made his blood boil because she always dressed so well, stimulating his imagination. It was as if she were some kind of deity, which made his blood boil even more. Embarrassed, Jimin asked if he was crazy, but Seo clarified that he didn't like her romantically. Instead, he imagined how incredible it would be to have a mass with her. He confessed he spent time playing with a toy goose and thinking about her at least 10 times last year. He added that he didn't like her as a colleague either since she always treated him like a fool. Seo supposed those feelings he had for her had disappeared, which didn't matter because she no longer meant anything to him. He asked her not to try to save herself by playing the victim or anything like that. This put Jimin in a difficult position until she asked if he would let her do it just once, as Seo didn't understand what she meant. With no other option, Jimin asked if he would be satisfied with having a mass, but Seo still didn't get it. Jimin asked if things would remain the same, as she didn't want to push further, especially since he said he liked her, but never tried anything with her. She also commented on how beautiful he thought she looked. That's why she agreed to let him help preach the word of God, believing it would be good for him. Seo agreed, leaving Jimin confused. Seo began preparing, and Jimin grew even more nervous, asking if it would be in the same place since they were still at work, and didn't know when Juna might return. Seo knew it hadn't been too long since she left, and he also knew the girl never returned on time after lunch, especially since Jimin hadn't declined the offer. He wasn't about to reject it either. He then asked where she wanted to start. Despite this, Jimin was still incredulous that they were actually going to do it, something Seo confirmed, showing no intention to pretend otherwise. To Jimin, Seo didn't seem rational because normally one would say no in such situations. When Jimin expressed this, Seo questioned why it should be that way, leaving her even more confused. Seo explained that if she thought about it, she was reaping what she had sown. It would have been different if he had made the proposal first, but it was Jimin who had made the offer. However, if she didn't want to, it was fine, as he had nothing to lose. Jimin just looked at Seo, embarrassed, thinking and asking him if having a mass would prevent her from being fired. Seo responded that it depended on her. Embarrassed, Jimin prepared herself for the mass, and they agreed they needed to finish quickly. Seo was genuinely surprised, admiring the girl. He thought she had done it all without thinking, which was why she made the offer. But after everything that happened, Seo realized he never had the chance to see Jimin in her Eva cosplay. He couldn't believe how she looked in it, which was why Seo asked her to sit down. Jimin believed it would be a quick mass, but Seo had a question about her Danonino. Jimin asked why he would request to see her Danonino, but Seo didn't see the issue since both were already in their cosplay. For him, it didn't matter if she showed it to him now or later, as he could already see it clearly. He added that if she didn't want to, he could forget about it. Embarrassed, Jimin eventually showed him her Danonino, leaving Seo speechless. He knew she wasn't the obedient and submissive type, so he assumed she must be very desperate. At that moment, Seo grabbed the Danonino, which shocked Jimin because she hadn't mentioned he could touch it. Seo was impressed. It was better than he expected, and different from what he had imagined, as she usually seemed too outgoing. Jimin admitted at that moment that she acted like a queen bee, but had her standards and wouldn't show her Danonino to just anyone. Still, she asked him to hurry up and do whatever he needed to do. After grabbing the Danonino, Seo started eating it. When he finished, he asked Jimin if she liked it, which she denied, saying his actions had only caught her off guard. However, to Seo, it seemed like something else, as her expressions suggested otherwise. Zio noticed Jimin's bottle of holy water spilling and decided they should start praying immediately. Zio was completely captivated by her expressions, as he never imagined she could be so beautiful. Jimin noticed him staring and asked why he was doing so. Zio was honest, explaining why, though Jimin felt he was saying strange things. Zio clarified that it wasn't that, and as they prayed, he said it was about believing in God. Still, Zio wanted to see her face while they prayed. He said he was going to get the holy water. Well, let's just say this last image explains what happened. To top it off, Jimin also spilled her holy water, not realizing it was still pouring out. Even so, Zio wanted to continue with the word of God, so they carried on with the mass. Despite using the holy water several times, Jimin knew Zio would do as he pleased, even if she refused. They recited the Lord's Prayer for quite a while, so much so that Jimin nearly fainted by the end. That same afternoon, Zio asked Jimin if she wasn't going to spill her bottle of water again. She asked him to stop teasing her, blaming him for the couch being completely soaked. Zio said he just wanted to make sure. However, Jimin asked why he was hiding, as the place seemed narrow and uncomfortable. Zio didn't have a specific reason and simply said he let his imagination run wild. Nonetheless, Jimin was impressed that the chalice still shone brightly, despite having consumed too much holy water before when the normal limit was twice. Even so, Jimin asked if it would be the last time, as Zio had promised not to ask her for something related again. Irritated, Zio asked if she was still stuck on the same subject. Jimin had no other option but to clean the chalice. At that moment, Yuna arrived, asking what Zio was doing. Nervously, Zio told Yuna she was late, but he noticed there was a stranger next to her. Juna wanted to introduce them to each other, so she introduced Sujin, who would be working with them from now on. Sujin greeted them nervously, though Seo didn't fully understand the situation. Juna explained that Sujin would be their new colleague, because she knew Seo had been carrying a heavy workload lately, and after several interviews, Sujin was the only one who convinced her. Then, Juna asked Jimin what she was doing under the table. Jimin didn't know what to say, especially because Juna also noticed that Seo was nervous and seemed to have been caught in something serious. Seo quickly explained that he had lost his pencil, and that Jimin, seeing him so focused on his work, offered to pick it up for him. He then asked Jimin if it was true, and she confirmed, saying she didn't want him to feel distracted or alone with any problem. This explanation left Juna thoughtful, but she accepted it and asked Seo to give Sujin a quick course on his work. Both Seo and Jimin felt relieved inside. Suddenly, Seo turned to Sujin, who was very nervous, and told her he didn't know how she ended up in that place but recommended she leave while she still had the chance. This angered Juna, who overheard him and began scolding him for scaring her. However, Sujin said she understood, which wasn't good for Seo, as he thought the girl wasn't showing enough confidence. She wouldn't even look him in the eyes. He doubted whether she could perform the job properly and wondered if Juna had brought her in as a volunteer. Even so, he noticed Jimin looking at him cheerfully. Seo asked if she had something to say to him, and Jimin replied it was nothing, but that if it weren't for her, he wouldn't have noticed his pencil had fallen. She added that she did him the favor of picking it up, although she didn't plan to do so again, assuming he understood what she meant. Seo didn't understand anything that was happening since he knew he helped her when she was in danger. If this was her way of repaying him, he thought she didn't feel anything after all they had been through. He bet she would have the same attitude if he didn't give her a response she liked. For that reason, Seo sighed and called Juna, saying he had something to tell her before starting Sujin's training. He explained that when Jimin arrived, she didn't help him with his pencil. They had been having a mass. This confused Juna greatly. Jimin quickly said she had misheard and that Seo was just teasing her, as usual. But Seo wasn't joking, as he knew Jimin had used a lot of holy water. Jimin called him crazy for saying such nonsense, but Seo felt guilty for keeping a lie and thought it made no sense to hide it. Jimin then suggested they go out for a drink and take responsibility for what happened, since it wasn't just Seo's fault. Juna asked Jimin if it was true, with a serious expression, asking if they had prayed in her office. Jimin tried to come up with an excuse, but seeing Seo waiting for her response, had no choice but to apologize to Juna. The latter couldn't believe what had happened in those 2 hours. Seo asked if she would write an apology letter, because submitting a resignation would be excessive. This made Juna even angrier, and she blamed him for everything, even provoking Jimin. Seo responded that if he had done that, things would have been different. Juna demanded he stop lying because she didn't believe Jimin would do such a thing with someone like him. She was about to continue scolding him when Sujin told Juna she wanted to go home. Juna didn't understand why, as Sujin had previously said she enjoyed her company. Sujin admitted that she did, but wanted to be honest. She thought the company was small and wouldn't have many clients, so she assumed she could work peacefully. She added that the fact an employee committed such a serious act and expressed it so openly was very different from what she had imagined. Juna quickly blamed Seo, saying her company had more future than he did, and asked Sujin to reconsider carefully. Sujin was about to do so, but upon seeing Seo, she became scared, covering herself and apologizing for not being able to do it. Afterward, a clause was added prohibiting inappropriate acts within the office. Juna was exhausted because it had taken time to convince Sujin to stay with them. She announced that the vice president would be in charge of Sujin's training and that Seo was forbidden from approaching her. However, Sujin still seemed very embarrassed.